To start, would anyone like to volunteer to be the process observer for today? Oh, I can't be listening to my own voice.
I will do it.
Thank you, Holly. Are there any agenda adjustments?
Not from...
Anybody have any? Alrighty. Correspondence?
I just wanted to provide the board a couple updates. The co-op board last week held our 5-year apportionment meeting. The formula was approved by a 73% positive vote, so we're very thankful for that, and that has been sent off to our attorney to update the co-op rules. Last night we had a very successful deliberative session over in Brookline. Everything was moved to the ballot at the recommendation, or the recommended amounts by the school district. At the SAU, just a couple things. Neva Williamson, which was accounts payable, accounts receivable, has moved to the Cape with her husband. He got a new job. So Neva has been replaced by Danielle O'Grady. And then Lily Chavez, also accounts receivable, accounts payable, will be moving on in the very near future. She's got a job closer to home for her. She'll be replaced by Megan Mercia. Megan is a parent and a resident of Brookline. So we're very excited with those two. I do also want to, I have a handout for everybody. Just as a knowledge base, we had 3 citizens petitions filed today. 2 were specific to the co-op district. One asking for SB2, which is the ballot voting. The second one was a citizen's petition for a tax cap at 2%. Both of those will be public hearings that we as the SAU, or the co-op districts, have to put on. We have the advertisement ready to go in the paper, and we'll take care of those and announce that tomorrow during the public hearing for the co-op school district. The third one that I handed out is a petition warrant article that actually goes to the town of Brookline. So it doesn't have an impact to the school district. We don't have to hold a public hearing. But I wanted to make the SAU board aware because it's a petition warrant article to ask the co-op board to begin a study looking at Brookline to leave the co-op. So the Brookline residents on March 11th would be gathering and taking action on that. If it was to pass as a warrant at that meeting, then it would be referred to the co-op board, and they would have to legally form a committee. We did this, 4 or 5 years ago, I believe. So we have an extensive amount of research, and then there's a whole process to that. So I provided you the law for the withdrawal and just wanted to make you all aware that it was happening, and that would, again, be part of the Brookline town meeting, not any of our school district meetings, but obviously would have a big impact on our school district.
So, Andy, a question on that. So it has to be voted on as part of the town of Brookline before it comes before the school board?
Correct. What happens is after a 10-year period of being a co-op, a town can decide they may want to withdraw. So they do that at their town meeting, and then it's the town who requests withdrawal for phase 1 is a study. So that would be the request of the co-op school board. They would be mandated to put a committee together, conduct a study. That study has to be done within 60 days. And then that is sent up to the executive board for the DOE, the Governor's Council. And the recommendations are looked at there.
So so you mentioned there was a committee several years ago that looked into this. Matter of fact, I served on that to keep an eye on things. What is your feeling from your standpoint that we could, or if it were to pass and it came to the co-op, what is your feeling that we could just reference the work of the previous committee?
I think we can utilize information from the previous committee, but I think we have an obligation because the board is not the exact same as it was then.
Yes.
So the co-op board would have an obligation to look at this through a new lens, but they could use data that is still what I would say current.
So the work product then of the co-op would be to provide the study to the town of Brookline and make no recommendation?
No, the work product of the co-op is to provide the study to the state, because it goes back to the Department of Education, and they do provide a recommendation.
I see, so the state's actually,
Ultimately, it gets decided up at the state level, which is in the
Yeah,
the
if you-
RSA.
Yeah, if you look at the statute, so we have 60 days to start the committee, 6 months to conduct, it says within 180 days after the committee's first meeting, after the committee's first meeting, then there's a report that's going to be issued. The report shall indicate whether withdrawal from one or more of the towns is recommended, not recommended, or whether more time and information is needed to make a determination. So there's some leeway there in the response, or the appropriate response.
So 60 days to form
A-
a committee, but 6 months to put together a report after that.
And one
So
of the
it's 8
conclusions could be, we haven't had enough time to study this, we need additional time.
Correct. Thank you.
So it's not a hard and fast 6 months, sorry, I don't mean to.
No, absolutely. I think that was, made it very clear for members. Sometimes I'm so into it that I know what it says, and I misspeak.
Well, and this one got rewritten a couple of years
Yes.
ago, and I had kind of forgotten exactly what had been put in place. It was helpful to have it in front of me, and thanks for making copies.
I don't want to derail this meeting with this, but 2 questions. Goes to Brookline Town Meeting, which is not SB2, right? That's
That's an annual meeting,
an
correct?
annual meeting, right? And then my second question is, the study that was done the last time they didn't trigger this statute. I think they just asked for an advisory study, is that?
Well, it was different, because remember, the statute was a little different at
okay.
that point. So, and it also came before everyone different. The old statute,
It's okay.
pardon me, I probably don't have it perfect, basically allowed a town to dissolve, and the first step was basically going to town meeting and having the dissolution started. That was what the Hollis town was faced with. At that meeting, there was an amendment to the warrant, and who asked, rather than it being the first step of an actual dissolution process, that the town of Hollis create a committee in order to study the potential for dissolution. Then the town selectmen put together the committee. I think there were 12 people on that committee. And there was individuals from each of the school boards, there were individuals from the select board, there were public members who served on that committee. That committee was a little different and was not necessarily a committee that was under 195:25.
So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. I would ask that we all do our best just to get the word out, so people realize that will take place March 11th at the Brookline Town Meeting, because I think, whatever the decision is, we will move forward, but I just want the public to be aware of the discussion. Mhm.
Public input is next, seeing there's no public. Next is the revenue and expense report.
Yes, in your packet, we provided you the most updated revenue and expense. We are presently have everything encumbered that we're aware of, and projecting our expenses to come in $8,611 below the budget. We are looking at that money eventually going into the fund balance. As of 7/1/2019, we would project $173,118. We had a board-approved use of fund balance for FY20 of $12,297. We would add in our projected balance of $8,611. And then we have additional fund balance to cover FY19 expenses rolled over. Those were expenses that were encumbered and would be paid out this year. And that's $4,000. So we're looking at a 6/30/2020 balance of the fund balance of $165,432. I will draw your attention to Kelly has encumbered a pool of money because when we first were receiving some of these recent resignations for people moving on, we never know if it's going to be a quick fix, a quick hire. what type of advertisement. Sometimes we've had to go to a temp agency, and those costs are very expensive. So at the point that this report was run, we still had those funds encumbered, and we're still waiting. We have one other person who's potentially out looking. As all of us know, it's a very, very good job market. The people that are leaving us, again, one was for a family move. The second one was for what I would call an increase in responsibility, therefore an increase in salary. And then the other one is kind of looking in that same category, and we'll keep you updated on that. But we're running very solid. Kelly and the business office are doing a wonderful job, and Bob decided to give Gina and Linda the night off and take their place, so he's going to be doing a lot of this for us tonight. Any questions on the revenue and expense report?
Just related to the business office, so how long do you think it'll take to fill someone in, and how do you feel about Kelly taking on the work in the interim?
The pieces of the funds are because we have, I'll give you the case with regard to Lily's position. Lily is actually doing the training and has been for the last 10 days of her replacement.
Okay.
So that's why we are encumbering money, because right now we're paying 2 people's salaries as we train one, because again, those are key positions, not as accounts receivable and payroll, but it's also a host of other issues that come across, in ordering supplies and all the pieces like that we have to account for. But I think we're going to be fine. Kelly and I met this morning, and we're very comfortable where we are, and we're very excited. As Bob and I talked later this afternoon, it seems that the 2 people we hired we're very excited about their potential.
Okay.
Yeah. Rob?
The ending fund balance,
Yep.
the 165,432.
Right.
Where does that fit within our best practice window of, funds that we like to retain for that?
Well, we try to retain a 7 to 10% balance. So if you just look at this year's budget's 1,000,007, so it's 170,000. It'd be 10% of that.
Yeah.
The only piece, the only piece to recognize would be in the SAU budget. We did encumber or get board approval if the facilities director's position is approved and the salary were higher than the amount budgeted. We had created that window to use some of those funds. So I think we're going to be in our target window. Yep. Great question. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on to deliberations? Do you have anything else? Okay. So we've got a bunch of policies to review. The first thing we need to do is I need a motion to take some of the policies from the table. So I'm looking for a motion to take from the table policies GBEF, EHAA, ECAF, BBBH, and JICL.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, great. So they're off the table. Now, do I just make a motion to accept the first reading and then we'll discuss it? Or to accept the next? Okay, so next, we'll start with GBEF. So I'm looking for a motion to accept the first reading of policy GBEF, School District Internet Access for Staff, as presented.
So moved.
Thanks, Holly.
Second.
Thanks, Krista. All right. So is this one that's the same as what's in the packet?
Yeah, the only thing we did was change around the capitals because Allison wanted some of the
Oh, okay.
grammar corrected. but
Okay.
It's pretty much
So
what's
it's
in the
pretty much
packet.
consistent with the packet.
Yeah, this was the only, we struck the last paragraph on this one. Was the only one. Was there any discussion or any questions on this policy?
So were you just mentioning the differences in the one that was sent out about 45 minutes ago versus the one we got earlier
Yeah, we met on Friday after those came out, and most of it's grammar. Allison didn't like the capital B, so we lowered the Bs, and it's really, this one didn't change at all with the
There's
intent.
no content change, it's
No.
just basically removal of the
We just-
last paragraph.
Got it.
Okay, so is there any discussion on GBEF?
Which of the capitals, the one that came through email, doesn't show markups on my phone.
Oh,
Correct.
like the first line board was capitalized,
Yeah,
Superintendent.
and since it's not,
I think
superintendent, those type of things, when they're not, when it wasn't SAU board,
When board was used generally, it was capitalized and it needed to be lowercase. So
isn't it defined in the beginning of the policies, though, as which board we're referring to?
It was just a capitalization, or the old one had for like the second word, the capital, it was capital
But I
B
think
for
it's
board.
correct to be-
It's correct to be capitalized, it's a defined term, it's meaning the SAU governing board.
Oh,
It's how statutes are done, it's a defined term.
As
It's not a
opposed to-
grammar issue, it's a legal issue.
As opposed to a board.
right, I thought that's what it was changing.
Okay.
Like the board does need to be capitalized.
It's a proper.
So Liz,
noun.
what about superintendent, because that was the other recommendation, like in the third paragraph? We took it from a capital to a lowercase.
Term someplace, I'd have to look at this.
I think the superintendent is supposed to be capitalized.
Yeah, me too. If it's meant to refer to a specific individual as opposed to a
Type of
general
job
position.
A title.
description.
So if you were talking about superintendents of all the different superintendents
Right.
in New Hampshire, it would be lowercase. If you're talking about a specific superintendent of a specific district.
Right.
It's effectively a proper name, it's a title. And those need to
So-
be capitalized.
So basically,
So-
those
Just need to
could be fixed so we
recapitalize them.
could change them for second read.
Yeah.
Good information, though. Thank you.
What was the reasoning behind removing that last paragraph?
We're not sure why any association would be posting. We assume that it was kind of referencing PTSA or somebody like that, which wouldn't.
I think what happened is it was copied from one of the districts that have bargaining units. So they had policies to govern how the unions could use email, but there is no union in the SAU, so it's not relevant.
Gotcha. Thanks for the detail.
All right. So we will bring that one back for a second reading at the next governing board meeting.
You gotta take a,
You can vote on it.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
vote on it.
Okay.
Is there any more discussion? Okay, we can vote on it. All those in favor of first reading?
As amended or
As amended.
as amended, yeah.
Which are we voting on the one that was sent with the agenda or the one that was sent by you today?
If we vote on the one that was sent
It's an
from the agenda,
It's not, it doesn't have Allison's changes in it, right?
one with the agenda.
Correct, the one with
Yes,
the
yeah,
agenda
I've got
has
the one with
everything
the agenda.
capitalized, and the
So
paragraph
the one
at
that
the
we
end
got with the
gone.
agenda is what we're voting on.
Yes,
So we
yeah.
can't
It's still gonna
approve
come
it.
back for second reading, I just.
it's still gonna come back for
Yeah.
second reading, so,
But
yeah.
we'll-
We
yeah.
may as well, keep the one that's.
I've got all the ones with the agenda, we'll just go with that one
Okay.
for the rest of them too.
Okay, so we're ready to vote again?
On the ones that was circulated with the agenda.
This is
With
for
the
the one
agenda, so we
that
don't have to say make
Originally
amendments.
is in the
Yeah.
agenda packet.
Right, so we don't have
Okay.
to say as amended, because we're not amending
Correct.
anything on
It's
this one.
still amended.
It is still amended.
Yeah.
But they said we made the motion as presented. So what we're saying is what we presented is
okay.
this one,
Got it.
the one
Yep.
that came in the original agenda packet,
I
not the
understand.
revised.
I thought the
So
original motion
there's no
was
amendment
amended
because
also.
those Bs and Ss weren't changed on the original one.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Does.
you're
Yes.
correct,
You're
you are
correct.
correct, thank you, Holly. All right, so.
Okay, did we vote? Was that a vote? Is that a hesitant vote? We voted?
No,
Or we voted?
Tom
All
just
those
said
in
in
favor
favor.
as presented?
9-0.
Thank you.
And Brooke, you're set, 'cause that was unanimous, so you don't have to worry about it.
I got
All
that.
right, so,
Thank you, folks.
Okay, so next up we have, I'm looking, okay,
Yeah, so motion to accept the first reading of policy EHAA, computer security, email, internet communications as presented.
have a second?
I'll second.
So why the change from the board to the SAU and the first line of that? This is a governing board policy. That says the SAU has established this policy with regard.
Amy, this is the one that you worked on the most, so.
Yeah, I mean, so we struggled with this when we discussed it. And I think, so you'll see that change actually throughout the document. We changed the board to the SAU because I think when we were talking about it, we felt like it was more something that the SAU would be, implementing and enforcing.
I think SAU was more of a broad term to the board is a specific body and the SAU sort of encompasses the potential for other.
But does the SAU establish
Yeah,
policy?
Right, it has to be the SAU governing board, is what you have to say, because you either say, and that's why we just say the board, because it's defined, because the SAU administration can establish policy.
So at least in that very first instance,
Right, I don't know
agree.
what,
Yeah.
I don't know the rest of it, but.
So is the suggestion SAU board or just the board?
Well,
SAU
the
governing
board is
board.
representative of SAU 41 governing board because of the policy header. So we could just leave it as the board,
Okay.
capital B.
Wait until Allison gets here. You guys have to get on her in this, because I did a lot of work because she told me everything had to be changed. Spent most of Sunday doing all this.
And then the same thing for the second, the underline, the SAU intends to enforce the rules. What is meant by that? Do you mean the board intends to enforce the rules, or do you mean the SAU administrator?
Who will do the enforcement?
Right, like who's the
So it would be it would actually be the board.
right, so,
Is
Right.
it? No.
I don't know, is it, I'm asking the question.
Superintendent is in charge of carrying out and following the policy.
Okay,
I think,
So we set them, but he
right.
carries them out.
But I still think the use of the SAU is unclear.
well, I would say the
Correct.
SAU administration,
I agree.
because that could be Gina for a certain policy, it could be Bob for
You
special
agree
ed.
that it's the staff of the SAU as opposed to the board?
Correct, you pass them, we enforce them.
Right.
So, Andy, on that regard, sometimes we put, and it appears in number 6 in this policy, superintendent or his/her designate. Would that be more appropriate, or SAU administration? Or,
Well, I think when I'm looking at the top part, like a lot around the computer software has been done by Gina, HB 1612.
right.
So I think when you say the administration, it gives me the flexibility. When you come down to number 6, okay, it specifically, when we're assigned to move into a, what I'll call a potential discipline situation, that turns over to me anyways. So I think that language is correct there.
Okay. Thanks, for clarifying.
I think for number,
Look who's here.
To be a pain in the neck, one of the things we've been doing on the co-op board, and I'm not saying everyone has to do it, but in number 6, when it says his or her
Yeah,
designees,
we
we've been
did-
saying there.
we had
Right.
that, is this the,
This is the one that was in the packet, but we did do that on Friday because that was one of Tom's
and also in number
suggestions.
4, we deleted gender specific, it should be gender, where it says gender specific comments as underlined, that's actually deleted, and where gender is deleted, I believe it should be
We put it
undeleted.
back in, yeah.
So those,
Oh, okay.
So the original said racial slurs, gender-specific comments, etc., and gender? What's?
no,
Sorry,
gender
it's just
had been
unclear what's
added,
there.
gender specific comments had been added, but it was reconsidered, I think, and deleted. after this version was made. Is that what happened? You guys?
And then
One
gender
that said
put
that
back
second
in?
email, it wasn't deleted though.
Right,
Okay.
she's
Yeah, it
saying
is.
that they
I
made a
have it here in
mistake,
front of me.
that there's an error.
I think that was.
Maybe it didn't show up
Oh, is
on
it
your,
crossed off in red now?
yeah.
Oh, so it wasn't taken out?
No, I mean, if you do that markup, it'll be gone, but
See, I
yeah.
can't on my phone.
Yeah, I know. No, we did take it out. This was one of Tom's suggestions when it went out with the board packet, so
So-
we removed that.
So because we're all looking at the one in the, let's just not worry. For all of these, even though we sent out updated, let's just stick with the policies that were sent in the agenda packet. Not worry about those because
Oh, yeah, we're-
not everybody can see the changes that were made, and I'm concerned about it causing confusion. So we recognize that there's going to be amendments that'll need to be made, but let's just stick with what's in the agenda packet and make necessary amendments from there. We appreciate the attempt to kind of update it beforehand, but I think it's just going to be confusing.
So, just so that I have my notes, so we're gonna do the SAU, administration intends to enforce the rules in that line. The SAU 41 in number 1 is acceptable, correct? We don't have to just put SAU and we don't have to put board. We had a lot of discussion before we got here.
I think we said to say the SAU administration, right? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in number 1 where it says,
I don't think the administration owns the computer system.
Correct.
So I think that SAU 41 would be an acceptable
Right.
term
Yeah.
there. And you didn't mention it, but you have, because you were talking about your edits, the very first line where we changed that back to board from SAU.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then
Yeah, I'm
number
marking it as we go so that I can make the adjustments for the second reading. So I'm just trying to follow the conversation here.
Of course.
And so in number 4, when we have the board crossed out and the SAU
You want to
added.
reverse that again?
Is that, do you want it to be the board prohibits discriminatory, or is that, I would think it would be the board, but
It is the board.
it should be the board?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And then number 6, we're okay with it being the superintendent or or their designee.
Andy, was this the one though that you
Yeah.
said about the certification? or
No,
was it
this
no,
is
that's
not
just
it.
for
Nope.
meetings, I think.
And so number 4, just to be clear, since we are all going by the agenda version, it reads right now that the gender-specific comments is in, gender out.
Right.
Are
So
you
we're gonna
guys trying to amend that right now, while
So-
we're talking about it, to amend it? And
Yes.
vote on as amended? So what should
We
that
will-
say?
We will remove gender-specific comments, and then we will put gender in where it's marked out.
Put it back in?
And put it back in, yeah.
Can I make a comment on that?
Sure.
Number 4. Did you consider gender identification rather than just gender?
Gender identity?
Identity.
Yeah, gender identity.
We
because
did
it's more
put that in
inclusive.
one other one, so that's a good suggestion. We can include it as
Yeah.
probably in everything that when we rewrite, we probably should put it that way.
So would you put
Well, is
gender and gender identity?
identification and gender, is that two separate things though?
I would think it could just be gender identity because, but
Right.
I think
I
it's
think
probably-
that gender identity includes, I identify as a female.
Okay, I'm just,
Right, I
yeah,
think gender identity includes
would
all.
include that, okay.
Yeah, so you could take out both of those, change it. And then it would match the other policy that you guys updated.
And we didn't do anything to 5, to 6. Was the one you just asked if superintendent was appropriate, and Andy said yes.
And it should be their designee.
There. Designee,
Oh, instead of his and her.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You know what
Yeah, we're
comment,
just
gender-specific
scratching.
comments is supposed to be doing in number 4? But I think we just violated it in number 6.
We took it out though.
We took out his or her designee?
No, yes, we took that out, and we also took out gender-specific comments.
Yeah, instead of gender-specific comments or gender, it's gender identity. And then in number 6, make it there.
But the point is that we took out gender-specific comments and reinstituted gender as gender identity
Tom, I'm sorry, can you just say it so everybody can hear what, in case somebody else is
I'm just
confused?
Somebody
what you
else
said.
needs remedial over here?
So, in number 4, we're removing the underlined gender-specific comments, correct?
Correct.
And then what had previously been crossed out as gender is now being replaced with gender identity.
Correct.
And the reason is that in that location, it is specifically talking about offensively addressing, whereas above it talked about it in just general terms. So you couldn't talk about things like boys basketball. And then in number 7,
6. We changed his, her to there.
Removed his and her and put there.
oh yeah, yeah, changed it there. That's there.
And in that, just the one that you should have in front of you, it has a crossed out have, so that's have is being removed.
Superintendent or their designated reserves and maintains extra.
And if things are just being cleaned up, there's an extra space in employees' computer system between the apostrophe and the S.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, that's really, wow, that was good.
It's the
Believe me,
perfect apparel of being a
we've been
lifetime
looking at
editor.
these since September, so we really appreciate the different.
Coded in
Yeah.
6, is that really supposed to be encrypted? What does coded mean in that sentence? I've never heard coded in that. I think it would be encrypted.
Encrypted, yeah, that sounds.
Okay.
Encrypted, yeah, because a password is a code essentially. They're
right.
kind of the same, so.
So
yeah,
we're
I
removing
agree with you on
coded and
that.
putting in encrypted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which one are you in?
Number
Still on
6 at
6,
the
last
end.
Very end of
line.
6, italicized, even if coded or passworded.
Maybe I think it was supposed to say encoded, just like encrypted. So I think either one.
I don't think it's a
know.
word.
We
I think
questioned
somebody
that
made
too,
up.
but it was in the original.
Password protected?
Or
Yes.
requires authentication or something. You know, password.
I know, that doesn't sound.
So you want to do even if it's encrypted or password protected?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Although I kind of like password.
You make up new words all the time.
Exactly.
Probably
Very
be in the OED
efficient.
next month.
Look at all those less letters.
So many.
Passworded, simple past tense and past participle of password.
Come on, girls, we got a
There you
long night ahead of
go.
us.
And we all
It's
understood.
archaic.
All right, number 7, is there any question, concerns?
Yeah. You know which one?
Oh,
That was, yeah.
The last sentence, all passwords
Yeah,
must
that
be
we
disclosed to
that needs to
computer
be struck.
administrator.
That's supposed to be struck. Let's
Yeah.
strike that,
That's
yeah.
being deleted.
yes, that's being deleted. I'm looking at the old one now, and I've looked at the new one so much, I'm not catching everything. Okay, 8. Nothing was changed.
There needs to be a space between the and intended and 8.
I think that might be a printout issue.
Is it?
Yeah, just because if I look at it on the screen, it's not, there isn't a space. There is a
Okay.
space, appropriately. Just appropriately spaced.
But not passworded.
But not passworded.
What about the use of SAU in 11 and 13?
11 and 13 should say the administration.
The
SAU
administration?
Yep. And just for the, looking at the policies, I think there are a lot of great suggestions, but we're only at the first reading. I guess my suggestion would be to consider looking at these, and then people can offer the feedback, because I do know you have a long night ahead of you. I mean, first readings are not intended to go word by word.
Right.
I think this is the only one that's really going to beat up a lot.
What?
I think this is the only one that's going to get beat up a lot.
We can hope.
That's a very hopeful thought.
Are you just daring us to?
Only because I.
No one can win this game.
I get the.
Everyone
as well as
loses.
Tom.
I think that's just
Tom plays
changes
this
and then
game like a
let's
master,
move on.
and I'm being quiet.
So why don't we
Welcome
vote?
to. All right, are we,
Um,
is there anything else blatantly in this one that you want to mention before we get off of this
I
one?
think you're good, you have the amendments listed, you know what the intent of the group is. I would just move on with this and you'll clean it up.
So is the motion as amended?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So all those in favor?
9-0.
Brooke, unanimous?
I thought she was gonna keep talking, so I don't want to hand
You want to do
Yeah,
that?
sure.
motion?
Motion to accept the first reading of policy ECAF, audio and video surveillance on school buses as presented.
I
Doing
second.
these as presented
So
or
moved?
amended now that
Or
we're?
is she motioning?
Well, she's motioning, I'm seconding.
Right? Yeah.
I do have questions about this one, but.
Okay.
But if it should be, electronic, like if I should email it and do it in the second one. Because with the viewing one, it gives parents permission, they have permission to request, but then it says that it only be viewed by the following persons, and parents aren't listed there. So it actually seems to say that although they can request viewing, it says recordings may be viewed only by the following persons, and only, so if they're not listed, then how can they, even if they request it, how can they be given permission to view them?
A
I think
parent,
the parent portion was struck.
It
a
was.
parent can't view the video because a parent has no right to see the actions of other children on the bus.
So why would you even entertain requests?
Right.
Because let's say that you thought something happened on a bus, and the administrator hadn't looked at the video, you could request that the SAU have it for the bus company. That's the way it works now.
Oh, so it's unclear to me then, that,
Oh,
that they
there's
can
something in
request
the
needs
to
some
see it.
verbiage
Yeah.
changes, that needs
Okay.
word changes to make that sound.
To have it reviewed or.
Yeah.
Right.
So
To-
they're
to have
requesting that the
recordings
superintendent or
reviewed
someone review
must
it.
be made.
Oh, okay.
So they're asking for other people to,
Right.
I
Right.
didn't get it either until we
Right.
just had this conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that just needs to be clarified.
Okay?
And is there a designee at all that could possibly be involved in this, Andy? Because right here, it's just you.
Right, most times when we get to this stage, because a principal can view the bus, so they usually start, so it's usually the principal has viewed it, the parents are unhappy.
So the question of who can receive the request, only you are listed right now.
No, and it says on only after expressly authorized by the superintendent. It doesn't mention a designee. That's all I was checking to
Right,
see if you
no,
had coverage.
It would, by that, it kind of comes to my office, okay? And most, the only time it would be an exception to that if I was on vacation and something had to be reviewed, so we don't have to worry about that, I'm never on
And
vacation.
it says superintendent or designee underneath
Yeah,
that
but
in
it's
law
for the
enforcement.
first
Yeah.
person that receives
The
It-
request.
For
Request,
safety
yeah.
reasons, we should have
To
their
have some sort
designee in
of
there, because
room
something
for-
could happen.
Sure.
Where
Yep.
the superintendent's out
Yep.
for an extended period of
Then
time.
you
And
have
would
an
you-
acting superintendent, the idea is it's only that one person at the very top.
Okay, so then maybe you don't need it because you'd have an acting superintendent if the superintendent's out.
If he's
Okay, that's a good point.
Superintendent
incapacitated
or.
If he's on vacation, is there considered to be an acting superintendent?
Yes,
Okay,
Okay, so you don't need.
Okay, well then we don't need a
no,
designee then.
no.
Okay, fine, great.
great, cool.
I'm good with that.
Mhm.
You have a person quarantined in another place so that,
Yes,
if anything were to
absolutely.
happen to you,
Is there
they'd be
somebody in
safe.
the room?
Yes, that's the person,
They got a
yeah.
safe room?
Yeah.
What do they call that for the president?
Designated survivor.
I think it's a rubber room.
If you ever can't find Andy, we know where he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any other concerns about this one? We will take care of fixing number 4 viewing, to make it read better.
Okay, so we're gonna vote. All those in favor? Okay, motion unanimously. What are we on?
Yes.
BB?
Motion to accept the first reading of policy BBBH, organization and operation of SAU joint board as presented.
How does the joint board differ
Seconded.
from this board? Governing board? Is it different?
I'm seconding your motion
Okay.
first.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought you already recorded it.
Say that again.
Well,
Carol?
what's the difference between the SAU joint board and the SAU governing board? So many jokes.
Well, I think it's one and the same. So this is a new policy recommended by the School Board Association, specifically for, I guess it's basically just saying that the policies of the SAU board may differ from the policies of the specific school boards.
Are we allowed to change it to say a governing board?
To
versus a
reflect the
governing
name
board?
of what our board actually is in our area?
Yeah, it sounds like this was just part of the boilerplate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
Right.
So, you know.
Just call it the
we
governing board.
usually
Governing board.
refer to it as the governing board.
Right.
So we should probably stay consistent.
Continue that.
Great. Any other thoughts on these two sentences? Can we also,
Punctuation and capitalization.
Oh, I got
So I-
yelled at about the first one.
in this particular one, sorry, I'm gonna dig in. Independent of those of the district, our board represents 3 different districts. Should it say the districts? Or those of their districts within, or
one
districts
district
somehow?
with 3 boards.
I think it's singular, but because what it's trying to do is say that if there's an SAU policy and there's a Hollis School District policy, if it's an SAU board decision, it's governed by the governing board. If it's a Hollis School District, it's the Hollis District policy that governs. And this has come up because in some cooperative districts, there's been confusion because policies are not identical, and one board is saying we should be using our policy, and another board is saying, no, we should be using the governing board policy. So this is just trying to clarify which policy to follow based on which board.
so the district, I think, I'm seeing that as means like any given district, you know?
Each
So in
singular
comparison
district.
to any one district rather than,
That's not how this reads though, I think.
right.
Yeah, I think it needs to, if this policy is supposed to be specific to our situation, we need to make it specific, because there is obviously more than one district. Independent of those of any district within
Right.
the cooperative or the SAU,
Right.
however we want to word it, I think we just need to be very specific, because it's not, that's unclear. How Andy explained it makes sense, it's just the verbiage here is not.
And interestingly, maybe the
Backing that up.
capital needs to go the opposite way this time, perhaps. If it's capitalized here, is it supposed to be lowercase, because it's not
Does anyone
referring to a
have the
specific-
exact statute that they're referring to? Because 194C is got.
No, I only have the
different
reference for
provisions,
that one,
And that's,
194C School
if
Administration.
that's due to an amendment, I'm trying to figure out what it,
No, I don't think it was an amendment, Liz. I think it's just come up. There have been a number of cooperative districts that have been having difficulties and trying to figure out what policies to apply. So I think that's why the School Boards Association produced this.
deals with.
So this actually was specifically for cooperative school districts.
Right, because
This is
if
just
you're in a
basic.
K to 12, you only have one policy manual,
You just have one
and
SAU.
we have 4 policy manuals.
Right.
Mhm.
Right, well, we have the note, I mean, we can just look at it and see.
If that D was just a lowercase d, it would solve everything.
Okay.
Because it speaks of what a district
Um,
is.
How about
Liz,
a
it's-
district?
Liz, it's RSA
Or a district
194-3 colon, dash C colon 3.
In general, it will be talking about a specific district, but you don't know which one.
194C:3 is for single districts, SAUs, which is not
Okay,
what
then,
we are.
I'm sorry,
The district, but you don't know
that
which
seems,
one.
sample policy for RSA, single district.
Which was why I'm thinking that
The
possibly.
implies a single. We're talking about a single.
I'm trying
Ours
to
has
find.
more than one
Oh, try
district within.
dash 8, semicolon 8. I'm just trying to find,
That's weighted voting.
Okay.
Are you guys good with the information for the next
Weighted
reading?
voting gets connected to the next one, which talks about additional votes based upon pupils.
That's an omitted policy.
I just talking about it.
Okay.
Sorry.
So let's vote on this first reading of BBBH.
You're gonna change all references to joint to governing, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Correct.
And take a look at the
Yes,
language.
and the language.
Obviously.
Language, yep.
Okay, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously?
No?
No.
I'm sorry, I thought you raised your hand.
No.
All those opposed? One. Sorry, Liz.
I'm opposed because I want them to go back. I don't think we need this policy, and I think that we just grabbed it because the School Board Association pulled it out, and I can't figure out why. Anyway, I want somebody to pull the RSA to look at this, not the recommendation from the School Board Association.
Okay.
I made a note, Liz, to do that.
Sorry, Liz.
It's okay.
It's the angle. I couldn't see that arm.
Do we need to do the calculation?
No, because it's,
No, because my vote really doesn't count at that point.
well, it's not
It is
that, the
first read.
calculation is done, it always comes out to the same numbers when only one district has
Okay,
one person.
all right.
So I have it recorded.
Okay,
I know what the number's gonna be.
all right, thank you.
It'll be good.
But you can play with the calculator and figure it out. That's way too.
Have fun, Brooke.
So you can get familiar with
It gives you
it.
something to do while we're all
Each
talking about
district gets
capital B's and
total
P's and C's and D's.
All right, Liz.
Would you like to make the next motion, Amy?
Sure.
Unanimous is 9-0,
Motion
not
to
the number
accept
of
the
people
first
here.
reading of policy
One board has one member.
BBBH-S, organization and operation of
Each other.
SAU joint board as presented.
Just take a break from the other thing.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Liz.
I have a blanket question. When we talk about Hollis Brookline Cooperative, Hollis Brookline Middle School, Hollis Brookline High School, is there a hyphen? Is there not a hyphen? And
No
can we,
hyphen.
because then that needs to be circulated widely, that there is no hyphen.
We don't put a
Because that
hyphen
is,
in it.
it's on signage. Thank you for clarifying.
Do you want a hyphen?
Do you want to?
Are you feeling
You
like
on the
it's
last one
missing?
now?
Okay.
Do a
But-
citizens
You know what, I
agenda.
never noticed this.
I mean, a amendment.
Is there discussion on this, or?
Oh,
Why is title related to BBBH?
BBBHS?
But what's the connection to BBBH?
Well, if we don't, if we end up not having it, it won't be, but
But I
they,
mean,
they thought
even
that this
even
was,
if we do
was
have
this for an SAU specific, based on the new policy.
So
That's why
this-
they put the S on it, was because it's SAU specific.
Right, this is our former BBBH policy with a few amendments. The school board was recommending that we add the hyphenated S to indicate that it is an SAU governing board policy as opposed to an individual district. Does that answer your question?
No, because we don't put S's, we haven't put S's on any other policies.
I think that I would be comfortable without the S because it would be in a separate policy manual. And I think what would get confusing is sometimes we list regulations and then sometimes we have procedures.
That's what I thought was happening.
Right.
With subordinate.
Oh, I see.
Right, so,
Appendix or, yeah.
and again, we have 4 separate and distinct policy manuals, so I don't think we need the S. I-
So then
Okay.
these two, they would be combined then? Because then they're both BBBH, and it would be combined.
Can we have two BBBH?
BBBH needs a whole lot of massaging with SAU board for the consistency of how we use it. But I don't see why you couldn't take the information in the proposed BBBH about, you know, the policies of governing board versus district and incorporate them into the existing BBBH and just revise it versus the S.
And
Yeah,
Merge the two.
merge the two and correct this stuff.
SAU level, it's not,
Yeah.
it's referring to the SAU, not district.
Yeah, but what is the SAU school board? It's this, right?
Yeah.
It's this, so it's, this
Yeah.
is, yeah,
It should, yeah, it should all be the governing board.
yeah, I would totally
Well,
tank the other
governing
BBBH.
board, Is it really a school board?
Right.
We don't govern a school.
No, that's what I'm
No,
saying,
government
like,
should be
we
the
would need
governing
to
board.
change
We govern
this
the
to
SAU.
reflect
Right.
what we are.
No reference to school.
So, like, B would be SAU governing board equals the combined school boards of the 3 school districts, or
Fine
just the
with
school
SAU
districts.
School districts.
Well, it shouldn't
I
be-
just, yeah.
shouldn't be singular and plural, it should be plural. But are the 3 school districts the entirety of the SAU 41?
Well, and the administrative office.
Then A would imply that they completely
Right,
constitute it.
right.
No, they're the SAU school districts.
And the administration.
And the
now.
administration. And he's saying the
So,
administration's
yeah.
missing from
Yeah.
A, and it is.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, you're saying it's
the
missing, I was like, oh, well,
SAU
it doesn't say.
So-
Districts plus
Yeah,
I'm not saying, I'm asking, my
It's a
impression that
school
it is, but I don't
administrative
know
unit?
the legal
Isn't that what it
definition of
stands
an SAU.
School administrative unit.
I'm
Isn't
not-
that what it
not
stands
what the
for?
words
It
mean.
is.
For instance,
So
you know,
then-
Washington DC is not a state. It's not one of the
I
50
gotcha.
states. Is perhaps the SAU the administration is not part of the SAU. I don't know how the legal entity is constructed.
I think
All right, we can look into whether that should be added there in A or not. And the others references are the SAU governing board.
you know what you're adding here.
The weighting RSA is just making that the way the RSA reads.
we can't.
yeah, this one's
I mean, I
tough.
think you've gotta go, I think again, you gotta go back to 194C, which defines what an SAU is. Says what they can and cannot do.
Well, this wasn't an approved, this is on our website. This was an approved one in 2013, so we didn't change anything with the RSAs that were quoted in here unless they've changed. But this was an approved policy by the governing board in 13. So we were trying to update it based on the fact that we thought that we should change it to the SAU and clarify a couple of other issues in it.
Aside from,
Well,
kind of the,
Sorry.
nope, continue if it's what you were talking about.
Well, we know, and this came before my time, but not Tom and Rob's, there was a whole discussion about how we got to this voting calculator.
Yeah.
And my feeling is this may be undoing some of that unintentionally, and I can't speak to that history. These guys can.
I don't think when first came up, I don't think that it was analyzed at the detail level. It was, we were looking at more of the gross things of the calculation, because it was brought to our attention by someone that the co-op at that time, probably still, based on membership, could essentially outvote the other 2 districts combined. They chose to. So, but the policy already existed then. I don't think it was created.
Yeah, I think it was discovered when I recall.
Well, 2013 would have been about the time that was all going on, maybe that's when that policy was adopted.
Yeah, I think the concern is that we were just doing straight up and down votes regardless of district. And somebody found, I don't know if it relates to 94C:7, but specifically, but
I think it was James who brought it up.
yeah, or somebody noticed that, hey, we should be, weighting votes and things like that. But I've always been kind of, it never really I never really figured that out because if you look at the co-op, it's constructed with extra folks on it anyway, so when you guys come to the board, you're already weighted. So it's like double weighting. I never really understand why it's necessary, because prior to this, we weren't voting on district lines. We were just voting.
But the voting part was the RSA.
Yes.
It was not something that we asked for or introduced. It was just acknowledging that is how the RSA
Yeah,
is.
there's an RSA that we weren't necessarily knowledgeable of, and someone said, hey, we gotta change how we do this, but it wasn't because we needed something different.
It wasn't an or, like you can either send more representation or you can wait the vote.
No, what it said, the RSA defines that you have two mechanisms for voting, and that at any time, a member of the governing board can call for weighted voting.
Weighted vote.
And this defines what that is, so that people don't have to go look it up on the website to see it.
I think it's been used like once or twice since we've adopted it.
So it sounds like what needs to happen with this one is go back to the RSA and do more research about that.
And combine, rather than have the BBBH new one, just incorporate whatever's in that with
And have a better
this,
understanding
and
of,
have it just be BBBH.
I think maybe a better understanding of the whole
And
weighted
is there
voting.
really an option around this weighted voting, because
Any board president. So any
Because-
one of these boards can demand a weighted vote.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't have to be used, but as a board, you can demand that it's weighted on a specific issue. And that's when the calculator comes into place. So it doesn't have to be used all the time.
No, well, even if it's not weighted voting, it's all votes should be calculated votes.
Well, that's a different part. So
There's calculated and then there's
one
weighted.
94C7 is representation. So each school district maintaining one or more public schools, so Hollis, Brookline, Co-op, shall be entitled to 3 votes on a joint board of the SAU. So this is why each board gets a proportion of
Total
the
of 3
vote. So if
votes.
only one Hollis member shows up, you get all 3 of your votes at a meeting. That's representation.
That's unweighted
Then-
voting.
Then there's
Yeah,
weighted.
And then there's weighted voting, which comes into play only if a majority of the members of any board present then request this weighted voting.
As I recall, there was a member after all of this practice was upgraded, who requested weighted voting my first year, and the board was required to vote on it. The board voted no, and weighted voting has not been brought up as a motion since, as I recall. Not listening.
But it can still be brought up though, right?
It can, but
Right.
it has to be voted on. It's not that Brookline or Hollis or
Right.
COOP can demand
Right.
weighted
No,
voting.
yes, they can.
Yeah.
You have to have a majority vote.
Majority vote from that
From
district.
that district.
That's not what we.
So any district can have weighted
Wait,
voting?
it says
I
weighted
thought
votes
the
can only be
co-op was
used
able to
upon the
have weighted
demand
voting.
of a majority of the members of any board present and voting in the in the school administrative unit. The school board members present at a school board administrative unit school board meeting shall be entitled to cast the entire number of votes assigned to their school districts, providing each representative present shall be entitled to the proportionate share as cast under 194C7, which is back to that representation.
That's unclear
Are
that
we
you're
on
talking
top-
about
are we
people
on
on a single
topic?
board.
Right.
Yes.
Well, it's related to the policy.
Well, can I suggest,
It's just, I don't think anybody really understands it.
Well, it has to be a single policy because my district is not your district. You and I are not on the same district, even though we're sitting at this table.
can I suggest we send it, we approve it
Yes.
for first reading, send it back, because it does need work,
Yeah.
okay?
Do you guys want feedback electronically then?
Yeah, yeah.
I would actually suggest that we do not approve it first reading.
Agree.
That's fine, too.
We can come back again for first reading again, but at this point, there's so much up in the air that whether it should be a dash S.
Well, then what I would suggest is maybe we make a motion to table this, because that way we're taking an action on it, and then we can bring it off the table like we did tonight, when we're ready with the information.
Well,
So it needs to
why objection to that is it'll continue to come back as BHH -S, and I don't think it should come back as that.
So, what would the policy committee like for feedback? If it's a first reading and it gets approved as a first reading with requests for email, feedback, I mean, you can choose not to accept it as a first reading. Is that what you're proposing, Tom?
Yes, because I think that it should, if it's gonna be brought back, it should be brought back just as BHH.
BBH. He
What happens
has a
if we say
point,
no?
because what'll happen
Yeah,
is if
'cause then
we
you'll
accept
have
it for
two.
first reading, it'll
Right.
go on the website as under review BBBH-S. So
Okay.
if, he's right, if we don't approve the first reading, you guys bring it back up to your policy committee and you come back with it
We're
as
sending it back to
BBBH.
committee,
So we're sending it back.
So-
But it won't show up on our website as being under review until it's for first read.
But the one that we
Right.
just by majority approved was the new proposed BBBH, and we just approved that
And
first
that'll
reading
go
of that
up
one, so
as
that will
first
go up
reading.
as
Right,
first reading.
and then we just need to
And
add
then
all
this
this other
one
stuff
is-
to that.
Right.
And this is there too.
Right.
And then we just have to merge them, or you have to merge them.
So I believe there was a motion and a second.
So then
We
we
have
just,
the motion.
so we just take a vote,
So
vote on first read.
okay.
And
So
what happens if we say no? That just sends it back.
It goes back to
Just
committee.
so I'm clear when I'm voting on it.
Sends
Yeah.
it back and nothing goes up on the website as being under review.
Okay. So all those in favor? All those opposed?
Done.
The motion fails unanimously.
I think it's a
That was
first.
kind of fun.
We're unanimous no's, we're never that.
You guys are harsh. Harsh.
I think that's the only time I've been excited that people were negative.
Unanimous no's.
Does anyone have a visual of like?
Mushroom cloud.
Tammy's gonna be over there.
What is this?
Weighted voting, that was back in 2012, and then there was this weird time in 2020.
Okay, do we have another motion, Amy?
Yeah, motion to rescind policy JICL, school district internet access for students.
Second.
Huh?
We are rescinding this because there are, our discussion with legal counsel, this is not applicable because there are no students
In the SAU.
in the
One of
SAU.
my first things I was gonna say.
Yeah,
I
you,
noticed that, I was gonna bring that up.
Yep.
Any discussion? Anyone want to keep it?
I
She's
love
like,
it.
I'm ready.
Okay, let's vote. All those in favor? And opposed? The motion passes.
That's
Two
exciting.
in a row.
Great day.
Voting no, rescinding.
I just want to make an acknowledgement of this policy committee because they were very ambitious in bringing forward, just Amy, you did a great job, and all of you guys, really wanting to kind of dig a little bit rather than just kind of scratch the surface. So, thank you for your great work and
Excellent job.
effort.
Well done.
I
Sorry
just
we,
have one
gave you so
question
much
around this,
feedback.
Andy, if I might. Our security policy, the rather substantial one that
Yep.
Gina's working on.
EHAB.
Does that also translate at the governing board level? Does that have to be accepted? Or maybe we did that at some point, but I'm just thinking since we're getting rid of this, something must replace it somehow.
well, what we will still have is the policy that governs the adults as far as our access and appropriateness. That's,
Staffing in the policy, right?
pardon me?
We have staff.
Which one was it?
Correct. We have a staff policy, so we don't, that HB 1612 really focused on classroom curriculum, teachers in the classroom. We have a separate policy that governs Bob and myself and what we can do in access.
You're talking about EHAB?
Correct.
That's the new one.
It's not an SAU level.
Yeah,
I don't know what
Okay.
specifically.
We
but
talked about that one, the data governance one, and I
Yeah,
sent it,
big picture.
I sent an email to Barrett to see if that was appropriate
Does the
SAU,
SAU
and
need
he
to
said
weigh
no, not a SAU level policy.
Right.
Because it speaks to security
Loading
and,
software on and.
yeah, all that, it's pretty detailed, so.
GBEF is school district internet access for staff.
No, yeah.
But the
what we're
EHAB one-
talking about is the protocols for.
That's that huge one.
security for people,
We can look at it and, we can look at it and see if we think that it needs to be at the SAU level, but the recommendation from him was no. I asked about that like 6 months ago.
Specifically, yeah.
Because
The only
when I
reason
looked
bring
at
it
it,
up-
I thought maybe we should.
The only reason why I bring it up, so if we apply it down at the districts levels, and we don't have continuity at the SAU level. Someone hacks into our computer at the SAU and goes down into the districts.
No, I agree.
Could be a
And
back door.
yeah,
So I'm just a little concerned about the security aspects and the continuity between the districts and what the SAU administration does. And are
Right.
they governed the same way? So something
Okay.
to think about.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to approval of meeting minutes. I need a motion to approve as presented the minutes from the December 23rd governing board meeting.
So moved.
Can you
Second.
remind who was there?
So the people that were not there were myself, Brooke, member Liz, Becky, Allison, and the other Allison. So those will be abstentions. Okay, so all those in favor? Any opposed? Did you get the numbers, Brooke?
Oh, sorry, no.
333.
Three.
I mean, that's what it works out to.
Right.
Because
They
we
were-
all.
Okay.
because everybody agreed. Yeah.
Right, yep,
Sounds
with
good.
9.
I just didn't know because there's,
Yeah.
as long
It's a
as
little
no
different.
opposition.
Exactly, it's 9-0.
opposition, it's
And
fine.
then the
Okay.
Do we
public
need to
hearing.
know abstentions or no? For present abstentions?
okay, so now we need to approve public hearing minutes. From the December 23rd public hearing, a motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
I second.
Thank you. Same members were absent, so all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, same as last one. correct?
Okay.
Okay. Now we need a motion to go into non-public. So, need a motion by roll call to go into non-public pursuant to RSA 91-A:3. Which one is it? To discuss a matter which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of a person other than a member of the body or agency itself. C.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. Erin, I.
Amy, aye. Rebecca, aye. Brooke, aye.
Aye.
Bye-bye.
Cindy,
Carol,
aye.
aye.
Oh, sorry.
Holly, aye.
Allison, aye. Cindy, aye.
Okay. So we're in non-public
We are now in non-public.
at 7:17.